but it's the tale of two wolves, and I think it's a granddad speaking to their grandchild, and he says, there's a every human has two wolves raging inside of them. I literally get shivers when I say this. It's like one of the wolves is anger, greed, lust, hatred, whatever, all the neggy things, and the other wolf is kindness, generosity, openness, respect, all of the good things, right? All the lovely things. And then the grandchild says, well, which one wins? And the very wise, I think it's a Cherokee, if I remember rightly, says, whichever one you feed.
Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. In this episode, I have the privilege of speaking with the renowned dating and relationship coach and free-time author, Persia Lawson. Growing up, Persia's parents struggled with drug addiction. To escape the challenging emotions, she focused on becoming an overachiever, and as part of her subconscious coping mechanism, she found herself leaning into an addiction to sex and love. She became well-practiced at sabotaging any happy relationships, either by cheating on the nice boyfriends or going out with the dysfunctional bad boys. Persia's rock bottom moment came in her mid-20s when she became a victim of sexual assault. Following this incident, she put on 2 stone in weight, which prompted her concerned dad to take her away to a health retreat in Thailand. Whilst there, he gave Persia some advice that went on to change the entire trajectory of her life. These words were the launch pad she needed to leverage all her overachieving energy towards healing the root cause of all of her romantic dilemmas. Today, Persia is going to be gracious enough to share her incredible story and offer the wisdom of what she learned along the way. How are you today, Persia?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And it's always interesting to hear someone reading your story back to you. Just kind of think, I can't believe that's me. I can't believe that's my story, but it is. So I've come a long way since then.
What was the feeling? What was the feeling? Because it must be, especially something like that. It might, there's very few really, for some people, just one of those things would be enough to be like a big life event. But you've had quite a few, unfortunately. How did it make you feel hearing all that?
Do you know what my overarching thing was? Well, 2 things. It's what I've already said, which was almost disbelief. I can't believe that was me. And that's probably partly because, that it is a long time ago now. And I've been doing this work and kind of got into self-development and spirituality and all that jazz back in 2011. So it's been quite a long time that I've been on this journey. But the other thing is pride. I have been going through, I've had quite a roller coaster few weeks. Well, actually say few years, but then I think we all have, but particularly the last few weeks, months. And what I've realized is it's not that life gets easier. It's not that you don't experience challenges. I don't get myself into the same scrapes that I used to, some of the things you commented on there. But you become more resilient. You become better at navigating the challenges, and the dark periods, they don't last anywhere near as long. You can come out the other side. So I feel really, really grateful for being where I am now in my perfectly imperfect, messy life that is wonderful, but still very challenging. But I feel really proud of myself because I am, I'm a big perfectionist. I have to really work very hard to not beat myself up. I've got that overachiever mentality, which has served me in many ways, but also caused me a lot of pain and distress. And I have to really, what I felt listening to that, so this is a very long answer, but this is classic me, but just hearing that, really proud of myself because I sometimes need to be reminded that I have done pretty well, and I'm all right, because I am always looking at what's next, where, what other mountain can I climb. Sometimes you just need to sit back and have a nice cold drink and just appreciate how far you've come. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I love that answer. I love the fact that you're proud of yourself, because that's the bit that's often missing for some people, is that acknowledgement, isn't it? Of wow, I've done stuff,
Yeah.
And one of the things I admire most about you is that you have done the work, and it's so obvious. There's so many people can read a book and they can have a few low level, but respectfully low level experiences and take some wisdom from it. That sounds good. It might make a nice quote or it might make a nice reel or something, but it's so obvious that you've done the work. It's so obvious. And I think it comes through in everything you do, actually. So not
You.
surprised, you should be proud.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. I really appreciate that. I think it's interesting to hear that as well, because I think you can become very normalized to it.
Mm.
It feels very normal to, and I still do the work. That quote, doing the work. Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
funny, isn't
yeah,
it?
I
But
know.
it is. It's like some people are like, what are you on about? But
There's
I
a
mean, I
few
guess
buzzwords knocking around that drives coaches mad.
yeah, I know. It's like, what does it mean?
Yeah.
But it's like a fish being in water or whatever the expression is. You normalize to it, and so you don't see the wood for the trees. You don't necessarily realize that is just your reality now. That's just your life now. And when I think back to, like, God, what I was up to before, no self-awareness and just running, running, running. And don't get me wrong, I can still have my tendencies to want to run or want to hide or not want to look at a certain thing in my life. But I think it's that, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So that's it. I always know whatever happens, I do have this deep belief I'm going to be okay, because I do have a toolbox. I do have support. And, you know, I actually don't want to say that the worst is over. You never know. But
Oh, don't say
I,
that.
yeah, don't say that. Don't forget that. No, I didn't say that. I know that whatever happens, I'll be okay, and I've got the toolbox.
But I
The
think what
relationships.
what doing the work means as well is that you never forget what it feels like to be that person, you know?
Yeah,
And that's so important because sometimes you can be so far along a journey as a coach or someone who's trying to help somebody else. And when someone's talking, you just that too far away from it. You're not connected to it still. You don't understand how it feels. And that might lead that's often what I feel leads people to give meaning, like they mean well, but they say stuff like, oh, cheer up, or something
yeah,
like that. And it's like it comes from a good place, but it's not helpful. And that's because they either never had the capacity to understand or they've lost it. I think it's
yeah.
so
Because you forget. Like, the first thing that came into my mind there is heartbreak. A lot of women will come
mm,
to me when they're in heartbreak or they've been ghosted or whatever, something like that. And you forget how horrific heartbreak is, thank God. And I think in the same way, a lot of women forget childbirth because you would never do it again, or most people wouldn't. But what's interesting is that, I'm not experiencing heartbreak in my life, and I haven't for a long time. But there are other areas of my life where, I'm going through something. I know what I'm talking about in relationships and dating. And again, I'm not perfect, but this is I do this day in, day out. There are other areas of my life that I am a complete novice, and I don't really know what I'm doing, and I can feel completely lost and like a beginner, and someone else would be an expert in that. And so I like what you said there. When I go through something now that I can feel even at a rock bottom or frustrated or like, and I'm like, this is how women feel in their love life. And it
yeah.
it gives me some empathy, because it's hard to remember. I remember it was horrific going through my rock bottom in my love life, but I can't remember exactly. I just know it was awful. you
Yeah, I
know
mean, a lot of the time I find when people go through stuff like that, it's because they have the secondary emotion, don't they? They have the easier emotion, the emotion about an emotion instead of the emotion about an event, which is the primary emotion. So they'll
Yeah.
be angry, and they'll think that that's the emotion. I'm like, no, that's the reaction. Like,
Hmm.
what's the emotion? The emotion is what made you angry? And that's when you get a
Hmm.
bit deeper and you start to understand, okay, they embarrassed me, or they didn't think about me in this, or they did that, or they did this. And okay, these are things we could do something about. Anger
Yeah.
is not something you could do a lot about other than wait.
Yeah.
Because trying to rationalize with anger doesn't work out very well.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
my experience. And I think that's what that does. It helps us connect with those people. We are that calm for them when they are in chaos, and
Yeah.
I love you talk about chaos quite a bit, and I love it because like you people might say, oh, well, what do you know? You have this chaos. Is that, well, you're the best person to talk to. You're in it. You're in it a lot of the time. You understand it. You understand how alluring it can be and how persuasive it can be and all these different things. You know it well. And I think that's the person you want on your side, frankly. Yeah, I think that makes much more sense. But For those that might not have come across you yet, would you mind telling people a bit about yourself and how you got to this incredible place you're in today?
So, in a nutshell, I am a dating and relationship coach and a three-time author, and I specialize in helping high-achieving women or female leaders get healthy, exciting, meaningful relationships that are a force for good, not drama,
Mm.
because my love life was just one big drama after another back in the day, and it's much more stable now. And I always say, I'm the least likely person to become a dating and relationship coach. Like you said in your introduction, like I really was a mess for such a long time. My parents struggled with addiction, and my way of dealing with that was twofold. It's basically two. What I've now realised, obviously, I didn't at the time. It was two different ways to get the same need met, and the need was I wanted escapism from the hard stuff going on at home that I didn't understand. I just knew it didn't feel safe or good, and I wanted validation because I wasn't really getting that at home, not in a consistent way. And so for me, it was like overachieving, high achieving, being the best, not at everything, but at enough stuff I cared about, A stars, being popular, boyfriends, being funny, being the lead role in whatever, like wanted that attention, that validation. Um, and and also the escapism from like being a hard worker, just able to block things out that were challenging. And so it was an addiction. It is an addiction that I've been working on for some years now. And the other side was of the other way I got that need met was boys from a very young age. Getting attention, being trying to win them, and this really escalated. Actually, funny enough, it was when my parents got sober when I was around about 16. You think that would be like the happy ending, but actually when my parents got sober, all that drama and chaos that I was used to having at home suddenly disappeared, and I went outside the family unit to create it, because as I always say, humans are drawn to what is familiar over what is unfamiliar, because even if that is shit, it's that thing, shit stinks but it's warm. The better the devil, you know how it's going to pan out. So we might get frustrated that we're always being ghosted or dumped or whatever it is, attracting emotionally unavailable guys or women or whatever it is. But actually that feels safer to our nervous system in a weird way, because it's like we know the ending. And that's why I was so confused, and so many of my clients are, when I first met my now husband Joe. And on the one hand it was so easy and so brilliant and flowed, and I felt like myself, but the duality was that on the other side I wanted to run for the hills, I wanted to sabotage it. And I see that all the time with women. It's because I wasn't used to being with a guy who was just upfront about how he felt about me, upfront that he wanted to be with me. And it was really confusing. And this is something that does not get talked about enough.
No, you're right.
So yeah, I'm really passionate about looking at the intersection and the correlation between particularly women who identify as being high achievers. Women think about how much we have the autonomy we've gained in such a short amount of time, the independence, the freedom, the achievement. But there is a freedom paradox, because we don't, having so much freedom in such a short amount of time, we don't really know how to navigate it. We are like, a lot of it is guessing in our career, guessing in our love life. Then there's the add into the mix how men feel about, being in a patriarchal culture, where now suddenly women have got all this power. It's a melting pot of so many issues and so many interesting things. I used to be an actor. That was obviously another way I got both escapism and validation. And so for me, the sort of psychoanalytical understanding, why do people do what they do, why do we behave in certain ways, has always fascinated me. So yeah, I work with women. I've got a coaching program called Love for Leaders. I've got a podcast called Love is Coming. I've got a book. Here it is. For the purpose of YouTube. That's it. Love is Coming. This was my first one. I always have like Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier. The Inner Fix. I actually had an old business with a friend when we started getting into it at a similar time, called Addictive Daughter, and we were focusing on helping women navigate quarter life crisis in their 20s, which had been our experience. And we this was back in 2012, so no one was really talking about this stuff then. Not like that. People were like drinking green juice and doing yoga at then, but no one was talking about, not in the same way, anxiety, depression, breakups, all of those sort of things. So we attracted quite a bit of media attention, And yeah, basically it sort of evolved, and in the process we got the book deal and I met my husband, and then sometime into our relationship me and my business partner and friend felt called to kind of go our separate ways, because for me it was always about relationships. That's the number one thing I wanted to focus on. And yes, so here I am today.
I mean, relationships, love, sex, all these different things are things that come up a lot as somebody, as the listeners, they want to hear more about it. They want to understand it because it's quite fundamental to our sort of our lives, isn't it? And most of the time there's sexual chemistry between men and women, whether they're together or not, and understanding that and putting boundaries in place, that's important. Obviously then in your relationships is important too. But I mean, I just want to go back to what you said there about finding that comfort in familiarity, even if the familiarity is not something that's good for you. I think that is, I just want to leave that there as something that's super important. I can't stress it enough. It's just that the words you use often is like chaos and messy, and I think that describes it really well, because I don't think you can put that in order. It's not supposed to be in order, and I think it's that sometimes it can be that trying to put it in order that causes the conflict. Sometimes you just got to go with it and just try to understand and let things go and accept things. People are people. Whenever you're in a relationship, there's a part you can control, and then the other part is up to the other person, and that doesn't always go how you'd like it, which is messy, right? Which is really messy. But I mean, how much do you believe the potential of our romantic relationships is determined by what's modeled to us by our parents or sort of significant role models in our life growing up? How much do you think?
I mean, they've done enough research, and I'm not a scientist, or no, it wouldn't be a scientist. What would it be? I guess, a psychotherapist. I'm not a psychotherapist, but there has been so many studies done talking about particularly the first 7 years of our lives. They are the most formative. So whatever was going on there is going to massively have shaped you. And not just that, but what was going on. This is fascinating. What was going on, not just with our mother. If you think about when we were a baby in our mum's womb, that egg would have been, it's actually what was even going on as far back as your grandma, because your mum was an egg inside your grandma and you were inside it really boggles my mind when you look back to how far it goes, like all of these different, and it made me understand, okay, right, granny, that explains a lot. Explains a lot. So I hope people might be like, oh god, I never really thought about it like that, but it's like what we get modeled to when we're growing up is huge. Because I remember seeing, I think most people do when you're a kid, and I see it even with my dog and my husband, like it's like you're the parental figure, the alpha, whether that's woman or man, whatever, that they are God. And so but what, of course, really they're human. And they're fallible, and they make mistakes, and there might be addiction, or you might have witnessed a really horrible divorce, or financial stress. All of these different things are going to influence your beliefs and your experience of life. Like, we see the world through the lens of our story. So for us it's fact, but what I perceive to be true and a fact, you might see that as a completely different thing.
See, this is so important.
It's so important. But what I also know is it's possible to change that. And I can say that, like, as much from my own story, seeing what my parents have done to overcome their addiction, it's possible. But let me just be honest with you, and this, your podcast is about self-development, your work's about self-development. It's hard. It's fucking hard, especially depending on the level. And actually, it's not even really depending on the level of trauma, because I know people who've had way more traumatic experiences or childhood than me, and mine was pretty hard at times. I know people with far less obvious trauma, and yet the people who'd experienced more actually are thriving now, because for whatever reason, it makes me think of this analogy, right? I love talking in metaphors and analogies.
Oh, it's me too. You're talking off the same.
Good. Okay, you're going to love this. You might know this one. But I did English literature at university, and obviously, as I said, I was an actor, so I'm always thinking in like this. But so oysters, as in oysters from the sea. The way that a pearl gets made is that a little bit of grit will get into the oyster shell, and they release this, I don't know what it is, some sort of substance called nacre. And the nacre is what enables that grit, that sort of foreign obstacle that would actually, or foreign whatever it is, that would kill the oyster. It turns that crap basically into a pearl. And what's interesting, all oysters are able to do that. They are all able to release nacre, but not all of them do. So some of them, the grit gets in and they die. I literally makes me emotional, because I think, I mean, how more apt could that be when you think about human beings? We all have the ability to change our story, to heal, but not all of us choose to. And it's not necessarily because this person's had more trauma. In fact, it can sometimes be the opposite. You need only look at people who have grown up children of celebrities or billionaires, and I've worked with a fair number of billionaires' children or teenagers over my career. And so we might think, well, what possible reason do you have to be miserable or unhappy or not succeed in life because you've had everything? Well, that could be the very thing that's the problem, because they haven't necessarily always learned how to be resilient and they've never had to worry, which means they get robbed of the, and obviously this is a generalization, but if you've never had to really work super hard for anything, and deep down you never will, then that can rob you of a lot. I've gone off on a massive tangent there. I don't even remember what the question was.
No, we're talking
about oysters.
I mean, you answered it really well. I mean, you spoke a bit about what I asked about, what's the potential for romantic relationships, is how much is it determined by what's modeled to you as a kid.
Yes.
And I think the way you answered it was perfect, because yes, there's what's modeled to you, but there's also that distinction of how you interpretate how that's modeled to you, and that's important too, because that's the autonomy that you have, and you could get it wrong. As a kid, you are a kid, right? You only know what you know, and you might see something and interpret it a different way, but it might not have been like that at all, or it might be a little bit like that, or it might really be like that and you're bang on the money. But that interpretation is key, and I think that's such an important, it just leans into the idea that we should explain to our kids a lot more than we probably do, left them
100%.
confused. Yeah.
Well, our parents, this is the thing, is they had a very different upbringing to us, because their parents were properly, in the war, and so I've had so much more compassion for not only my parents but my grandparents and all of us, the way that culture moves and society and communication and all of these things have developed. How wonderful that we are able, a man and a woman, today's world, can sit and have a deep conversation about our feelings and about the relationship between men and women and all of these things that, gosh, 50 years ago or even less, it would not really be like that, or it would be very, very weird. Now we've got people all over the world doing it, and that's
we'd be niche, wouldn't we?
we would probably, And then if you go further back, women burn at the stake for being, for some very crazy, well, not crazy things, but it's crazy how much has shifted over the course of history. So back to your point about our interpretation, humans are story making machines. We cannot help it. And so much of my work is about, are you telling a story that is going to support you heading where you want to in life or not? And listen, you're not always going to be telling that. It's not always going to be you're always telling the right story, and but you can be directionally correct. So you're moving in the right direction, and bumps are going to come, obstacles are going to come, you're going to have wobbles. My God, have I had them over the last week. But I also know that it makes me think of another metaphor. That story that I'm sorry, just so I go off on a lot.
I love it. Go for it.
I just accepted it about myself now.
I love this is great. Go for it.
So it's like a fable, not a fable, one of those sort of words that I can't think what it is, but it's the tale of two wolves, and I think it's a granddad speaking to their grandchild, and he says, there's every human has two wolves raging inside of them. I literally get shivers when I say this. It's like one of the wolves is anger, greed, lust, you know, hatred or whatever, all the neggy things. And the other wolf is kindness, generosity, openness, respect, all of the good things, right? All the lovely things. And then the grandchild says, well, which one wins? And the very wise, I think it's a Cherokee, if I remember rightly, says, whichever one you feed.
Oh, love it. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you know?
that one is that's a very powerful, because you're right. I mean, I've just recently done a mountaineering trip, and I've had a fair bit of trauma in my life. I grew up in domestic violence and torture as a child, both physical and emotional, and I had some issues around addiction as well as a consequently because of that. And people ask me all the time, you know, how I got through it and all these sort of things. And I think what I learned was people think that change happens over a long period of time, but it doesn't. It happens in a moment. It happens when you make a decision. And I think a lot of the time, the reason people struggle is because they're still not sure what they want. They haven't made that decision yet. They just haven't made it. They're still on the fence. And it comes a lot with addiction. People say, why can't I stop? It's because you haven't decided to yet. You haven't made that decision. You haven't had enough pain, or you haven't had enough of this situation enough in order to choose the other one, you know? And it's like people don't understand that when you take something away, they focus on the alcohol, right? So they're like, oh, the alcohol, the alcohol. Well, what you focus on grows stronger. And it's like the alcohol is gone. There's a void there. What are you going to put there instead? That's what's important. What's going in the place of that? Because if you focus on that, then that will grow, you know. But people focus on the lack of, or the alcohol, or whatever it is they don't want. And then they give it all their attention and energy, and then it just sort of just stays there and gets bigger, and eventually the white knuckling stops and they open their hands and they give into it, because what other option have they got? They're not entertaining the idea of learning a new way. Alcohol for me was a coping mechanism. I didn't have any other coping mechanisms. That's why I chose it, because it's the only one I knew. When it went away, I had to focus on choosing other coping mechanisms, discovering them. If I didn't, I would have just gone back to alcohol, you know, because it's the only thing I know. Now I've got loads. I got absolutely loads, and they're all really like nothing like what anyone would think. They're crazy, but anyway, that's divulging too much.
Well, I just want to circle back to what you said. I love that thing that you said about it happens in an instant. I remember, like, when I was going to stop cheating. I was a cheating addict, and then it got done to me, and I just sort of been starting. I was like 6 months into my self-development, spiritual, whatever journey, and then I had it done to me and had my heart broke. And in that instant, it was like, I will never do this again. It was like, nope, I will not do this again. And I'm not going to say there haven't been close calls, because life is life, and like, I'm not going to lie, and many addicts will relate to that, because for me it was addiction. You know, I went to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous for it, but it suddenly lost something, and it's like I could never unsee that. And same for me with cocaine. Like, I wasn't a cocaine addict. For me, that was, you know, I don't think I probably bought it once, but it was always around the men I was with, and it was just there, and it was a vehicle for me to act out in sex and love addiction. And one day, not because of cocaine, but that was a big factor in this particular weird night. And I just had it would always be the thing that would get me in these very weird, sometimes life-threatening situations. And it was just like, one time, it was like, I'm done. And it's not been hard to say no ever since. But what's hard is the journey towards that rock bottom.
It's the worst bit. Making the decision is the agonizing part. That's the bit that people don't understand. Don't get me wrong, you'll have hard days, but making that decision, like when I decided to give up alcohol, I used to be someone that never cried when I was younger. My dad looked at crying as a reward, so I used to withhold it and things like that. It's very complicated and miserable story, so I won't bore you with it. But like, what I heard there was like, I kept trying to give up alcohol, but actually, once I catered for the need, alcohol gave me up. I can't think of any reason now why I would drink, because it doesn't give me anything anymore. I get nothing from it, you know, whereas before it obviously replaced or was a placeholder for something. I know what that is, but it was, you know, I often talk about the contradiction of why I drank, which is I drank to connect with my emotions. I also drank to get away from my emotions
Yeah.
because I would start drinking, connect. Oh, don't like it, don't like it, don't like it. Get away, get away, get away. And it would all happen in one night. So
Yeah.
what I had to become better at was understanding my emotions, and it's the two things that you said. I escaped, and then I validating my emotions. I'm angry. Yeah, what's happened? This has happened. Right. It sounds like, yeah, you've got every right to be angry, and letting myself be angry, letting myself be upset, letting myself cry, letting myself feel my emotions. And I can hear that language in what you're saying. And I think it's such an important message. So thank you for bringing it up.
I just want to ask you, out of interest, that making a decision thing is so interesting, because it whether we're talking about addiction or we're talking about that guy who keeps dicking you about, and you can't, so in that case it's the addiction to just say, do not contact me again, and mean it, not in a
Yeah.
gamey way, to actually be like, I can't do this anymore, stay away from me, and you go and focus on your own healing, your love life, or whatever that is. Do you think that, you talked about white knuckling it, so white knuckling being where you're just like sheer force and willpower, that you're trying to not engage in that harmful behavior? Do you think it's possible to, like, do you have to hit a rock bottom? What is it for you that enabled you to make that decision?
For me, it seemed like it's like a cliche. It's choose your hard. It was becoming increasingly harder to live life like that, to the point where I wasn't sure, give or take a few months, whether I would live through that, because it was getting really difficult. So the other choice had to be at least worth trying. I suppose what I'm trying to say in a way is I'd had enough pain.
Yeah.
I'd had enough. I couldn't do it anymore. It was too hard. It was so hard that this other thing looked way easier. It wasn't, but it looked way easier at the time, and it was alluring. And I sat with somebody and I spoke to them about it. But then eventually, once I catered for that need, which was just to be nice to myself. I mean,
Yeah.
why are humans so horrible to themselves? I used to
Oh.
be a PT a long time ago, and I used to have women come to me telling me that they wanted to work with me because they hate the way they look. What? That's not going to stand up as a good motivator when it gets really difficult. I hate myself. What about you learned? And I get it. I'm not going to start on about self-love because that's quite pressurizing. I think sometimes when someone's been practicing self-loathing for a long time, offering them the opportunity to love themselves sounds ridiculous to them. You know, what about liking yourself? What about getting to know yourself? Yeah, cool. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's get to know ourselves. And once we get to know ourselves, like in any relationship, you learn about that person and you start to respect them. And then you
Yeah.
can start to change yourself because you respect yourself enough to do it.
Yeah.
And that's it. For me, I started to build self-respect. And I talked
Yeah.
about climbing that mountain the other week. And I got on that mountain and it stripped me bare of all the bollocks, all the lies, all the narratives and stuff that I sold myself and bought off myself too. And I'm sat there with just what's true. And it was up to me whether I was going to accept it or not. And you know what? The mountain didn't care. The mountain doesn't care if I get to the top, doesn't care if I'm struggling, doesn't care about any of it. The mountain's like, dude, I'm not changing. You need to change. And I'm like, okay, understood. And that's another moment where I made the decision. I got to the top of that mountain because I decided to. I decided that I'm getting to the top and I will suffer the whole way. And I did. I had altitude sickness. It was horrible. But I knew that when I got to the top, I'd come through for myself. I'd casted a vote for Johnny. Yes, this is what we do now. And that's important, I think. I think people don't realize that sometimes they're the problem, but they're always the answer.
Your
They're
solution. Right.
always.
This is really crazy how synchronistic this is, because mountains they're a really big feature in my book. And the reason is my dad, this is so weird. My dad, that one of the main reasons he's sober today is because of mountains, because he right now he is climbing mountains in Mongolia. He goes
Goosebumps.
away, he climbs them because it's that thing of like he's an addict through and through. It's like I need something really intense to focus on, to crowd out when things get hard like that. Yeah. And my husband Joe and I, back in 2017, we actually went and did a massive trek with him in Nepal, which was amazing.
Wow.
And we saw Everest. And actually the epilogue of my book, the quote that I introduced the chapter with is from Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first mountaineer to summit Everest. And he said, "It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." And so that was, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so aligned. I have to say this.
Goosebumps, man. Yes. Yeah, I know that quote. Yeah, I've actually forgot about that quote. That's amazing, because you're right. You know, I had to conquer myself. I got a little way up there. Sorry, I'm talking about myself on the podcast.
No. Can I just, what mountain was it, by the way?
It was Mount Tukau in Morocco. It's the highest point in North Africa. Yeah, it was.
So you were in Morocco a few weeks ago.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago. Yeah.
So was I.
Oh no! Stop it.
Yeah, that's mad. My husband was working on the set of Gladiator 2, and they were filming in Morocco, so I was out there with him. Bizarre.
No.
So you were climbing the mountain. Go on.
Yeah, and we got a little way up, and I was really struggling. I had altitude sickness, I think, but the only way I can describe it was I felt so unwell, but I couldn't tell if I had a headache or a stomach ache. That's how bad I felt. I felt so terrible. But I made that decision that I was going to get to the top, and everyone went off in front, and that was cool. But we got to this corner, and we left at 2 a.m. in the morning to get to the summit to watch the sun come up. I wasn't going to make it, and the guy that was with me said, "Johnny, you're not going to make the sun up at the summit, but if we stand here, you can watch it from here." So you got two guys sat on a rock. One's been in the military, pretty nails, and we're overlooking the mountain region. And I just start crying. And I start telling him everything that's been happening to me in the last couple of months and years, and my whole life, in fact, you know, stuff as a child. Bless this guy, met him on Monday. This is like Wednesday, and he's like, "Oh, huh?" You know, so I tell him all this stuff as the sun's coming up over the mountains, and to me it was just the most freeing moment. I finally understood. I finally got it. I finally realized that, you know what, I keep waiting for it to be easier, but it never gets easier. This is life. This is what it is. This is the experience, you know. And the guy doesn't say anything to me. He doesn't touch me, doesn't give me a hug, doesn't say any words. He just sat there and lets me talk. I talk, and then I get up, and then he looks at me in pure military style. He says, "So we going or what?" And I was just like, "Cool, let's go," you know. But I was down to 3 steps and stop. I felt awful, but I got to the top, and I did it. I did it for me. And it's like, I'm finally realizing in my life that I'm not that scared kid anymore. I say it all the time. It's like, I used to think I was fearful and weak, but actually I found out that I'm not. I'm brave, because you can't be brave without first feeling fear. And I'm now beginning to believe that. And and ironically, I mean, it sounds like you deal in energy. It's funny, you become really lucky once you start believing in yourself, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I love what you said there around, like, this is life. It's hard, because I feel like I've been on this crazy, well, arguably all my life, definitely the last few years, haven't we all? But the last, it's just been like, you know, but it's been like one good thing, one piece of bad news, but then actually the bad news ends up being good news. And it's been like this. And I can really, because the perfectionism, the achiever, I can beat myself up, like to your point at the top of this episode. And actually, it's like, can you just stop for a moment? And all these tools I've learned in 12 steps, and I actually go to Al-Anon for friends and family of addicts and alcoholics, and which changed my life. You know, a lot of the similar things in AA, where they talk about one day at a time, and sometimes it is one step at a time, one moment at a time. This too shall pass. You know, I've written, you know, the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it was only relatively recently that I mean, it's such a profound prayer, but I'd not ever, I had been saying it thinking I am, the goal is to get serenity, but actually it's saying, grant me serenity so that I can do the hard things. So actually, if we're looking, start with serenity, and start with, basically the message of this first book, which my dad said when I was in dire straits back in Thailand. He said, if there is one piece of advice I can give you, it is this: focus on the insides and the outsides will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's a cliche, but it is true. It is an
Uh,
inside job. And if every time, and I do it all the time, I forget. And I teach this stuff. I write
mm,
books on this stuff. How quickly I go into something goes wrong and it brings up emotions. And I'm like, right, I need to fix the external circumstances. That will make me feel secure. No, 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 no. I need to come to myself and I need to get the security within me, because one thing I learned in Nepal that, again, I forget all the time. And I reminded of it when I do have conversations like this, is we went and helped out in this school, which had been destroyed by the earthquakes in 2015. And we were literally sleeping in a tin hut. It was the most basic you can imagine compared to other bits of our travels, which were super luxe. It was a real hodgepodge experience. And I'd never felt such peace and so free. And I'd never seen people so just joyful. And I'm like, because there's something in this simplicity. They understand the important thing of life, and it's loving one another, being kind to one another, being present. They didn't even know where their next meal was coming from half the time. And so, I just have to it's coming back to simplicity. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make about 12 points, but the main
no,
thing.
but I think it's the excitement in it. It really comes across, like, because it's such an important message, that simplicity. And it's the same with relationships. I think people can make those relationships complicated unnecessarily, so by predicting what the other person's thinking or what they're going to do or trying to control, when actually I think one of the greatest lessons that I ever learned in my life, and it always will be, and sometimes I have to relearn it, it's just the way it goes, is acceptance. Learning to accept things, because people say to me all the time, I'm trying. And I say, well, there's the problem. There's no energy attached to acceptance. Accepting is just whatever it is, the trying, the energy, that's all the problem, because if you're trying to accept something, you're trying to change it so that you can accept it. And that's not the game. And this is what we do, don't we? We don't like the question, so we change it until we can answer it with something we like instead. And nothing is harder than what we don't want to be true. It's difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult, and that's why it's so important that people understand their relationships better, and that's why you're here. I honestly, I could talk to you for hours, but I feel like, there's people are like, okay, we'll talk about relationships now. So, all right.
I know, got around the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is all relevant, isn't it?
It
Because
is.
everything we talked about, when you understand this, your relationships become so much easier. They
Mm,
really do.
I always find, though, it's that resistance to it that causes the conflict. In every situation, you stop and you have that aha moment of, "Oh, I was resisting. I was resisting what is. I was trying to make it something, and that was the problem. That was a waste of the time. And now all of that energy I used up caused all of this conflict. It's cool that then reflected back on me as pain or discomfort or bad mental health or depression or whatever, anxiety, worrying about. I had a definition of anxiety once. It was the awareness of infinite possibilities. I was like, oh, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
So go back to relationships. You're so open about your history with relationships, and I'm so grateful for that, because I think it takes honesty, doesn't it, to really look at yourself. What perspective would you offer that person who is in a dark place right now with love, sex, or their relationships, and just is feeling like this helplessness?
Mm. Oh gosh, you're not alone. When you're in that place, I mentioned earlier how when you're out of it, it's so easy to forget that it's harrowing. It's harrowing, and you have every right to feel the way you're feeling. But you know what is on the other side, and you won't believe that when you're hearing this right now. What is on the other side of that is so magnificent. If you choose to believe that you can get through this, and actually your life will become richer for it. It goes back to what we talked about with the two wolves. So this is again a cliche. When you go through heartbreak, hopelessness, and I've worked with women in every conceivable context and situation you can imagine, but it's the choice, it's the decision. This is gonna make me bitter or better.
Oh,
This could be, like my parents. I'm so grateful for their addiction, which I never thought I'd say, because I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today. I wouldn't have learned the things or been able to help people in the way I have, even in the darkest, shittest things. And we've, there's a lot of shit that goes on in the world, and that certainly is right now. But when you see great tragedies, you also see people rallying together, and you see the most unbelievable bravery, courage, kindness, compassion, generosity, all of these things. So, I've got another quote for you.
Oh God, do it.
It comes from writing books and acting. And this one is from The White Devil. Is it by John Webster? I've got it up there somewhere. So this was a play I did at drama school. And there is a line that says, "Through darkness, diamonds spread their richest light." Ooh. Through darkness, diamonds spread their richest light. And I mean, it's Jacobean like tragedy. It's heavy, that play, but some of the lines in it, you're just like, wow, it's so powerful. It's so, so beautiful. And and in my experience, it has through, again, a bit of a cringe. I think Florence, it's not from her originally, but it's always darkest before the dawn. But, in my life, I've had so many experiences where that has been the case. And so all I would say is, you're not on your own, but surround yourself or just get support. Do not suffer alone, because you can get through it. How many times you're in a terrible place or mood or whatever it is, and you just speak to a friend and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. There's so many simple things that we can do that we hold ourselves back from for so many weird different reasons. But there is relief, there is support, and there is healing, and there is so much incredible stuff the other side of it. So
it sounds like what you're saying is look for that hope, because you're in that moment where you're like, everything feels hopeless. And, that's how people make really terrible decisions, because they give up hope. And I think if you can find that hope, no matter how small it is, and look after it and then grow it, then we're onto something, aren't we? That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
You're like a quote machine, man. Love it.
I know.
You really are. You're like the quote machine. I love it.
That would be my special skill on whatever that show is that I can't remember. I can remember like bizarre quotes from Jacobean tragedies, but I can't remember like the name of popular TV shows. But that would be my special skill on whatever that show is.
You've got it the right way around, to be honest. I like to be able to remember quotes. I'm terrible. I'm like, oh, there's a really great quote. I can't remember it though. And it's like, that's helpful. Thank you. So okay. So for someone that's in a dark place right now, around love, sex, relationships, finding that hope and just reaching out and just talking about your problems, because I think you're right. It's like in therapy when there's an awkward moment where they look at you and you're supposed to talk, and you talk, and then you start saying stuff, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, is that true? Wait, I know I said it, but hang on, I didn't realize I felt like that. And then that's it. You're having that dialogue with yourself, and you're starting to get to know yourself, is what goes back to what we said a minute ago.
I just want to add to the point about hope. One of the things I did when I was in my darkest times was I would go and either read books or even sometimes just get on Google. This sounds a bit cringe, but like I was in a horrific heartbreak, and I would Google celebrities that had gone through a horrific heartbreak and were now happily like married. Because that gave me hope. It's like I needed stories of people who'd been in a terrible place in the area that I was struggling with. And that's why 12-step meetings are so powerful, because every day, there's meetings everywhere, they're free, and you can go and hear people telling stories of literally from the darkness to the light. And that's why I wrote, actually both of these books, The Inner Fix and Love is Coming, particularly Love is Coming, is I wanted to, for that person who's struggling, in their love life and feeling like there's no way out and there's no hope for them. I've been there. I really have been there. And there is a way out, but it's one day at a time, and you can't do it on your own.
I did the same with exactly that with alcohol. I looked which sober celebrities are there, and it was like if I could just latch onto one of them that I thought was cool, then there was hope.
If they can do it and they're cool, then
I don't know what that's about, but okay, I just heard that, like, cool, so you need to be cool, do you, Johnny? Why?
Well, that's a whole other thing.
We're going
one thing at a time.
We'll move on real quick. But people often believe themselves to be guilty, and I love this topic, of self-sabotage. So in
Yeah.
your opinion, is it self-sabotage, or is it their only way of self-soothing?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's, oh God, I've never really thought about those terms before. I love it. So I think that it's probably a mixture of both. So why would we self-sabotage? Because we don't feel worthy of whatever that thing is. And I can still do this
Mm.
in really weird ways, around like procrastinating, I can just, that can be a silly way. But I think that there is also some self-soothing in that. It's like we were talking earlier about shit stinks but it's warm, and I almost think that's the thing. It's like a comforting blanket in, oh yes, that's me, that's the identity, that's my belief about myself, that's my belief about the world. So by sabotaging it and staying where I am, I get to feel safe. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, the prompt for that question is, like I said to you earlier, I used to drink alcohol when my emotions became overwhelming. Now, I
Yeah.
didn't do that to sabotage myself. It did sabotage me. It sabotaged
Right.
relationships, it sabotaged friendships, it sabotaged life events, work, all sorts of things. I did it because it was my own, for me, it was my only known way of soothing myself. If I can
Right.
just drink, I feel better. What I was wondering was whether that was the relationship you feel you got from sex and dating and all those different things. Do you think it was,
Mm,
if you could do that chase, that it gave you that worthy feeling, or whatever it is? I don't know. I don't want to put
yeah.
words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I see what you mean. Okay, so it's not, I'm the person who's sabotaging
Mm,
isn't going out to sabotage themselves or their lives.
yeah.
They're going out to feel either two things: relief. Actually, arguably, it's always just you want relief from the pain.
Mm,
And so for me, sex and love addiction was a distraction. It was a way I can focus on that and that intensity. And it was like excruciating,
mm,
but also masochistically so,
yeah.
in a weird way. And that was a way of, that was, even though that was hard, it definitely had its, but that was still preferable to feeling the grief and the trauma and the sadness and the pain. And
Yeah.
that's why, you can look at, and I, in fact, my husband and I walked past someone the other day who was literally just like, I thought it was yesterday, on the floor, clearly drunk, like a real state. And you're thinking, how has it got to this? How has it
Mm,
got to this? Because you're just in so much despair and pain. It's the only way that you know to soothe yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's thought provoking that, I started thinking this way a little while ago because I started thinking that these people are two that I'm talking to, these CEOs, these high rollers, whatever you want to call them, they're not idiots. So what are they doing? They're doing it because it's their only known way of doing it. And it goes back to what I said before about, then the trick doesn't become removing the alcohol or removing the sex. It becomes about finding what it gives you so you can replace it in a healthier way, more of a choice, if that makes sense. And I just wondered whether it was the same for you. Do you think it was the
Yeah.
same for you?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was the same for me. I was looking in sex, and I was looking to be activated as well. I liked it was the adrenaline of
Mm,
it. So and it was interesting because it was at a time as well where I was feeling it got worse and worse when I came out of drama school, and my acting career wasn't going great, and so I wasn't getting that validation. So that's why it really ramped up, and needing it in my love life, because it was the first time I'd been out of education, formal education, and with that I could be acting a bit, doing my thing. I was still a mess with men, but because I was getting A stars or lead roles, or whatever, when I came out of drama school, everything fell apart. Worked in that strip club, put on the weight, and it was like all of my old things that I'd got the escapism and validation weren't there anymore. And
mm,
so that's why I needed that relief that I used to get from being the best at certain things. And that's why I think I kind of really ramped it up in my love life. And I hadn't thought about it exactly in that way before, but I needed to soothe myself. For me, what I've realized, I've got a chapter in the book, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I talk about this, this insatiable need to be the best. that a lot of perfectionists or high achievers will get. And it doesn't mean you want to be the best in everything, but the things that are important to you. And the opposite side of that is this fear of being a failure. Like it's something I struggle with so much. Like I cannot be a failure in my life in any way. But what's that about is my biggest coping mechanism when I was a child with my parents' addiction was I'm going to get the love and validation by being the best in all areas of my life. That was my coping mechanism. And when sometimes my parents or whatever would see it and acknowledge it, and sometimes they wouldn't for whatever reason, and so it would just make me strive. And so it was like this it was like the pushing the boulder up the hill, and as soon as you get there, you cannot win it. You cannot win it. One of the things I do with the women I coach is right at the beginning of the process is we look at the subconscious programming that has led them, like that kind of got set off in childhood, that has led them to be acting out these patterns. And so much of it is based around what was the struggle you were trying to win as a child. You know, what were you doing to try and be seen, to be loved, to be whatever it was. And so it does, if someone's had, you know, mine was pretty extensive. I've had women who went through a lot worse and women who didn't go through as bad, you know, whatever on paper. But it's all subjective, and it's still this inner child in us that is trying, really, we're just trying to be loved and feel, and because feeling loved as a child is what makes you feel safe.
Yeah, it's that safety again. It's that self-soothing and moving towards it. For me, what it offered me was some compassion. You know, it offered me some compassion. Why did I do these horrible things to myself? Why did I become the rock that created all these ripples? Why did I do that? And it's like, because you were trying to feel better. That's much better than I was trying to destroy myself, because that doesn't make sense. Because why would I do that? You know, that didn't make sense to me. It aligned with me a lot more because I was trying to make myself feel better. And it's like, okay, little child, little Johnny, here's some other ways to do that aren't so destructive, you know? I want to move on to something, and you can feel free to shut me down on this because I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. But you mentioned that the strip clubs, and you also mentioned somewhere else, I think it might have been your website, that was where the sexual assault happened. So as an event, obviously we don't want to talk about that specifically, but like, how did that change things for you? Because you mentioned it being a real pivot for everything for you. What happened to you in that moment?
It's interesting. So for context, I just finished my master's in European classical acting, did really well with that, had lived in Russia, had performed on the Globe stage, came out, didn't get an agent straight away. Everyone had kind of always been, oh, you're going to be famous, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. And so suddenly felt that, oh no, I'm a failure. What the fuck? I can't be a failure. That is tantamount to death. You know, that means death to me because I have to be the best. That's my worldview. That's my view of myself. Needed some money, was a skin actress. Literally, and when I say this, it's like it feels like a bad movie, but it was my life. I can't believe it. I remember, I think it was I actually think it was the London paper. That's how long ago it was. It wasn't even the Evening Standard. And I remember there was like the back of it, like adverts. They probably still have them today. And one of them was like hostesses wanted, you know, glitzy gentlemen's club or something like that. And I remember thinking that might sound a bit brothely, but I don't know. And I just my whole way of dealing with everything back then, and it can still be now, but just not as intensely, is like humor, self-deprecation, you know, sarcasm, all of that. So all of my love life shenanigans were like broadcast out for people, for entertainment, for my friends. That's how I felt in control of it. So I remember saying to a friend, like, I'm going to go along and I like could make some money, and like I'm, you know, I get bought drinks out when I go out anyway. I might as well get paid for it. That was my logic. Went along, did the interview, and they were like, "Yep, great, get started." And just wasn't really thinking about it. I remember getting there, and you know, it was me and 6 other girls getting ready in this really cramped room in Mayfair, and they, you know, had actual really, you know, hard lives. They were younger than me. They had kids in, you know, some of them were from Eastern Europe. They had kids, you know, back home. And there was me just, you know, hello, you know, really posh. And they were just sort of like, they didn't like me. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And so then what I do is go into, well, I've got to win them over. game on. You know, that's another thing. Like with it doesn't matter if it's man, women, someone doesn't like me, right, I'm gonna change your mind. That is my challenge. Again the addictive thing. And so yeah, started working there, and it was basically we got paid by we had men would come in, and this one it was never that busy, to be honest, at all. Sometimes it was completely dead, but we'd have to get them to buy a bottle of whatever, and then we'd get a percentage, like 10% of whatever we did, and I was bloody good at it. I had the gift of the gab, and so I didn't strip. I just basically chatted to men. I do remember once a man who must have been close to 90 tried to fill me up, and I was like, fucking hell, what has life come to when you're getting felt up by like your great granddad, but not your great, you know what I mean? It was
yeah.
And it was just bizarre. And then I ended up, they were not paying me they were like, oh, you know, he got you the cheaper bottle. I was like, no, he got me the most expensive, thank you very much. We weren't even supposed to drink it. Like this is like £500 bottles sometimes. You literally just supposed to go in the toilet and throw it down and then fill your glass with like ginger ale, which I never did. I was like, I'm not wasting expensive champagne, thank you very much. And if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here drunk. But they wouldn't pay me what I was due. And obviously, what are you going to say? Who are you going to tell? Do you know what I mean? So they kind of have you. And one of the girls said, look, there's another club in Soho. It's a little bit seedier than this one, but you will always make money. And I went to that place for one night and one night only, because my, you know, what I would say, my higher power, the universe, whatever, got me the fuck out of there, because that's where I was sexually assaulted. That I remember going in there that night. And whereas I could sort of, I don't know, brush off the Mayfair place being like, yeah, it's a bit, but whatever, it was just passable for me. Like I could get my head around it. This Soho place, it was like, you're not in Kansas anymore. Like this is not a joke. These people are fucking scary. There were trays of cocaine going around. It was just, I remember just being really scared. But then, you know, trying to put on the show, and like there were a lot of the other hostess women, there were strippers, like they really intimidated me. And yeah, I just got like a particular man who was actually very nice. But he took a shining to me, and then it just all this whole weird situation happened that actually involved two of the other hostesses who basically used me in a very weird situation. And the saddest thing about it, I remember going home, I'll never forget this. I came out, it was like some basement somewhere in Soho. I came out, sunny day, it was in the summer, birds singing, bin men, you know, your bloody early morning joggers and the people with the coffee, and you're just like, you know, coming out like. And I just remember being like, what? And I lived in Holborn at the time on my own, which was not a good thing for me to be doing. And I remember the next day, because the manager was very happy with me, he said, right, you must come back tomorrow. And the next day I went to go, and I literally I was on the bus, and I remember feeling like someone was doing Chinese burn on my intestines. It was so painful. I didn't know what was going on. I was in the street trying to crawl to this strip club. And then it was so much agony. I called my parents, and I obviously didn't say where I was going, but they came and picked me up and took me to hospital. And I thought, oh my God, is it appendicitis? Like, what the hell? They did x-rays like hours later. I'll never forget this. And the doctor goes, I don't know quite how to say this, but you have, it seems you have severe fecal impaction. And my mum goes, what, full of shit then? Which was about right. And that was it, because I'd been not sleeping, drinking too much, not looking after myself. And my body, and this is why our bodies always know, like I put on, like, and that from that point, you'd think I would stop. But no, I went off to my friend's wedding in America, and I carried on the crazy behavior for another 6 months. And that's what, you know, in the 2 months after that sexual assault, I put on 2 stone in 2 months on an acting job in China. I went even, so this is the thing, something you would think when you look back, you go, well, that was kind of the rock bottom, but that version of me did not perceive it because it carried on. So it wasn't even my rock bottom.
You didn't know another way.
My rock bottom came when, I'm just trying to think, it was really like, oh God, it was the night before Christmas. It was bloody New Christmas Eve, and I ended up sleeping with this guy in the travel lodge opposite my dad's like office. Saw my dad when I was coming out the next morning, hid under my great grandma's like fur jacket. It was all just drama, and my dad had said like, we're going to Thailand, and it was almost like my rock bottom was that. I remember feeling a lot of shame and like, oh, I'm not in a great place for myself. And then we went to Thailand, and it was that it was almost like basically it wasn't a rock bottom, it was like I was given a moment to just stop. And my friend had given me this book before I went called Women Who Love Too Much, which is like, every woman needs to read this book. It's amazing. And I happened to just open it on the plane or wherever it was. And it said, there was this sentence that said, daughters of drug addicts tend to inherit a predisposition to like really dysfunctional relationships with men, something like that. And I remember being like, oh my God, that's me. And I carried on. It was like, what, it was, the book was there at the right time. You know, when you're like struggling with
Sounds like
something and
validation.
it was the validation. And
Yeah.
suddenly this is what got me out of the hole, was the part of me that's always been the avid student, the learner that wants to grow and excel. Suddenly it's like I understood, okay, my love life's a mess, I'm my career, everything's a mess, and there is a way out. This isn't just because I'm a bad person. Like, of course I'm like this. Your parents might be fine now, but you have not dealt with any of that shit.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so it became actually more from a place of curiosity than anything and then it became, right, project me. I get it. Okay, I need to focus on the inside. So I was like, I remember coming back from Thailand being like, Mum, I understand I've been a mess. Give me a month. I will be tippity top. I'm gonna like complete the 12 steps in a month in Al-Anon. And my mum was like, okay, all right, darling, go for it. It's not really like that, but you know, and so to be honest, I did transfer on my like high achieving onto recovery, but better that way, to be honest. Like you said, it's like, if you're going to have to fixate, like, get addicted to the good stuff, like transfer all of that messy addictive energy onto something that's
it goes from being a curse to a superpower, doesn't it?
Yes,
You know, it's like a superpower. I say it all the time. Like I used to have terrible hypervigilance. Whenever I was in a pub with anybody, I'd have to have my back to the wall and I'd be watching. That comes from being a kid that knows that things are going to kick off and get scary if I'm not aware of my surroundings. So what do I do with that? I turn it into helping people. I can sit with clients and I can see and hear not what they're saying, but what they're not saying, the tone of their voice. I'm taking it all in all the time. And it's all because of that experience, that hypervigilance. I mean, I felt really protective of you through that story. I have to say, I felt this real protective, like, oh, you know, I hate things like that. You will have no idea how much I hate stuff like that. I really, really do. And I just got a curious question, and that is that lost person back then. Have you found compassion for them?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Good.
Every time, like I think there's when I think about it in terms of my love life, yes, because I've done so much healing there. Like there's still a long way to go. Like, you know, now I'm obviously married and so I'm in a new chapter with new challenges. And they're not extreme like, you know, what I used to deal with, but they're still there.
Yeah. Relationships are hard. They are.
Relationships are hard.
Yeah.
And what I really what I struggle more with, and it's what I'm working on a lot at the moment, is, and it makes me emotional to say it, but is that the high achiever, the fear of failure, the not be like, that's something that, yes, it colored my love life too, because I did feel like a failure in my love life, but that's something that I'm still really having to work on and be gentle with myself and on such a journey with, because I definitely still can judge myself a lot. So you're not good enough, you need to be better, you need to be this, you need to be that, and I can be brutal to myself. The difference is I'm so much more aware, and as I said, I've got tools now and I've got things in systems in place that I can go into that and then go to a meeting or whatever it is, you know, speak to my coach, speak to my mentor, speak to my friend, support system, husband, and go, oh yeah, that's the disease, that's the illness, because it is. I have to see it in the same way with the alcoholic. My perfectionism and overachieving, how horrific that is to me, you know, like how detrimental that is and how cruel that is to myself. So coming back to self-compassion, it's a lifelong process, is what I'm trying to say.
I want to say that you're incredible and that you are not a failure. I understand that plight. I'm going to share it with you and say that I feel the same way. I used to battle against it all the time. But what I found was a better way, was making friends with it. I found that was a better way, almost in a jokey way. Like, there you go again, doing that thing instead of, oh, stupid Johnny, you're doing that thing again. You said you weren't going to do it, blah, blah, blah. You know, I honestly, I get it. And when we switch this off, we can chat, we can share stories. I get it. I really get it. Thank you for sharing all that. Like I said, I felt really protective of you through that. It just, that lost that lost girl just trying to find her way and getting it wrong and getting into more trouble and all that sort of stuff. And you can see how that can become the evidence for somebody that they're not good enough. But it's not that. It's they're just in this really bad pattern, this loop, you know. We have
Yeah.
this thing in depression where people slip into a maintenance cycle, which is where they actively maintain their own depression. People, it doesn't make sense to people, but they do, because of exactly what you said at the beginning, which is there's comfort in that familiarity, you know. And once you get stuck in the cycle, the only way out is get out of the cycle. Well, how do you do that? Well, you need to stop doing what you're doing. A hard stops anywhere, it doesn't matter where, just stop. And I think that was forced on you with that would you call it fecal compaction? I've never heard of that before.
Fecal impaction. Yeah.
Impaction, yeah.
The most glamorous thing in the world.
Hey, listen, if anyone could pull it off, well done. I'm going to move on to something that people are really passionate about. A lot of when people ask about relationships and dating, this is something they want to talk about. And that is a common example of self-sabotage is cheating on a partner. Yes. What do you feel are the main drivers behind somebody cheating?
So as a veteran cheater, former cheater, there's a big double page spread in the Sun that's still online about my cheating proclivities back in the day. It's not about the other person. That's the number one thing, because you know, when you've been cheated on, you can think it's, if they really love me, then they wouldn't have done this. I'm telling you now, it's nothing to do with you. You need only look at like celebrities, like stunning, beautiful, talented, rich, everything, you know, what they get cheated on too. So it's not about you not being attractive or whatever you think it is. It's about the other person. It's about the cheater. It's a way, it's you know, all sorts of things. Commitment phobes. So you're looking for an exit strategy out of a relationship. You're looking for a high. That was my thing. I wanted the high. I love the fear of falling in love, the danger. You know, it was, for me, there was nothing more powerful. The high that I got from cheating or from falling in love. It'd be any drug ever. And it gave me that validation. So for me, you know, like all addiction, it's progressive. And I went from, you know, just cheating on my boyfriend to then like stealing boyfriends, because it's like the hit wasn't, I was becoming numb to the hit. So I had to do more and more extreme things. And, you know, like it was, sometimes it was women that, or girls at that time, they weren't good friends, but I knew them and they knew me a good few times. And that was really hard, because I've always had the story of myself of like, I mean, I love men and I love women, but I'm a good friend. I'm a loyal friend. I will have your back to the hill. And so when I started doing that, you know, that was really hard to marry up. And also, you know, when it came out several times, I had my Facebook defaced, which was completely fair enough. I remember, I'll never forget this. One of the things that got written by one of the women that I'd stolen her boyfriend, she wrote on my Facebook, "You absolute slack-jawed swamp donkey."
Wow.
I was like, that, I mean, that's quite hard to hear, but actually really quite funny as well.
It's like a very niche insult.
It's very niche insult. I mean, I think that's probably Shakespearean.
Yeah. That is a very niche.
It sounds insult. Shakespearean, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So back to your question. Yeah. So cheating it's all about the cheater, and it's not about you if you've been cheated on. And I think you can't hear that enough. But I also think that it's, you know, like I said earlier, when it was done to me, it changed me. And I will never put someone through this again. I didn't realize quite how horrific it was. The sense of betrayal was so painful. Yeah, I can't remember what the question was. I just knew it was about cheating.
No, we're just talking about the main drivers behind it. And you've said, you know, one of them is a dopamine hit. Another one could be an exit strategy.
And it's the validation and escapism comes back to that.
Yeah, the two words used right at the beginning. I mean, I once spoke to somebody who told me that if somebody is getting their needs met, that they won't cheat. Do you believe that? No.
Well, look, it depends what those needs are. You know, you can look in a relationship that's very healthy, but the addict isn't getting fed from that healthy relationship. So it's, I don't know, in my head, when I think of needs, I think of like, that's like a healthy thing. but you can have a really great supportive partner who is fulfilling whatever needs, sex or love or whatever your needs are. But if that part of you, you're not getting that high, but that toxic high,
And that's a good word.
Yeah, it's a toxic high.
Yeah, that's a really good word, because it's not, I suppose, like, it happens a lot, like, what is it, like midlife, I suppose, where people get into that rut of they've been married for a really long time and all that, and then they end up cheating through circumstances or whatever, stuff like that. That's why.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's right. So that absolutely can be it. And I get that. And I've had experiences where I've gone through a hard time in a relationship, and for whatever reason, maybe the chemistry's sort of dwindled or whatever it is. And then, but the healthy person doesn't just go and cheat.
Yeah.
They might be tempted or whatever, but they have strategies around it and communication. And what I will say is what can be hard is when the person who isn't getting their needs met and maybe feeling tempted to cheat, to feel seen, to feel that chemistry or whatever it is, something that's important in your love life.
Yeah.
The hard thing comes when you do try and address it with your partner and they don't want to talk about it. And this can often happen to women and men. Men aren't going to talk about it, that they're going through a hard time and therefore they're not feeling particularly sexy, or like they want to have sex or whatever it is. You've been together for some time, so that like spark is not as intense as it was at the start. So this is not saying it's okay to go and cheat, of course it's not, but both parties need to realize, if one person is saying I'm struggling in our relationship because of this, if that other person is not willing to be a space for that and to go, right, okay, I need to go and look at my stuff because this is, they're not able to do that, then it's, they also do have a part. I don't think it is always as simple as one person is the villain and one person is the good guy,
It never is. No, it never is. But I think that's so important there, because if people want to move forward from an incident like that, and we're going to get onto that in a minute, I think there does need to be an accountability from what, if somebody's not meeting that need, then they need to sort of own that. Now, that's not the same as blame, and that's not saying that they deserved it. There's no excuse for that. They would try again, would have been my, maybe try again. But what I'm saying is, I suppose, is that, like, if you want to move forward, it can't just be that one person's fault. It has to be like a shared thing that it needs to be navigated through together. And it is difficult, and there are hard conversations, and there are things that you don't maybe want to admit or be true, but that doesn't mean they're not. And that's difficult. Because the next question is, can a relationship survive an incident of cheating, in your opinion?
I believe it can, but it requires two people who are brave and are willing to look at themselves individually and the relationship, because it's always like, okay, what was going on for you that led this to happen? What was going on for the other? Like, and so you've got to do your own work around it, and then you also got to do the work together. And not everyone is up for that. No. And often we'll see that it's one person wants to stay with the other and drive, and sometimes cheating can even be a call, a cry for attention. It has been for me in the past, not necessarily consciously, sometimes consciously, but sometimes it's like, I'm not feeling seen in my relationship, and I've tried to communicate and I've tried, and they're just not meeting me there for whatever reason. And then, I see this quite a lot. And so then it becomes a way of like feeling seen, but I think also just like, well, something had to shift, something had to. And so, for some people, an incident of cheating can be the best thing that happened to their relationship, because it's a wake up.
I have seen that. Yeah. I've seen, and I suppose what I will say is, like, keep an eye on that ego, because that ego wants to gravitate us towards what feels good and away from what feels bad. But what feels good is not always good for you. And it's like that ego afterwards will say, oh, you didn't deserve this, you didn't deserve that, and all these different things. But I suppose what it comes down to is not, can you get over it, can you move past it, is, do you want to? It comes back to what we said at the beginning. What do you want? Because if you want to, then you're going to start cultivating things towards, yes, they did a bad thing, they understand that, you understand that, all those things, but moving towards what you want, if you want to stay in that relationship, then throwing it back in their face is not always going to help. I don't think.
Well, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
And this isn't just cheating, this is anything. You
Mm.
did that one thing back in 1999,
Yeah. There you go.
and I've been guilty of that even in friendships or with family. It's like, no, no. If you're going to move forward, you've got to move forward. That's different from saying, listen, I'm struggling because I've been having some nightmares or some
absolutely.
like stuff's been coming up for me, and I'm it makes me emotional even saying this. It's the actor in me. It's like I go into
You're method actor.
That person. I feel like I'm acting it.
No, it's lovely.
The saying to your partner, I listen, I've forgiven you, and I haven't forgotten, and I want to forget, and I want you to understand this is not me blaming you, but stuff's coming up, and I don't want to pretend to you that it's not, because then we're just right back to that fucking problem again, so I need to just tell you where I'm at. I'm feeling some pain, I'm feeling some anger right now, but this is a toolkit. This is what I teach, work with my clients in my program Love for Leaders, where we were not given any lessons on communication or relationship skills. We were just told fucking algebra. Who's ever done that at school, since school? It's wasted, trigonometry, for God's sake. So if you don't actively go out and learn how to do these things, which sound quite basic, communicate well, but it's not fucking easy. The more you do it, the better you get. And so we have to take responsibility for that and go and educate ourselves, because if you want to have a healthy relationship, it's not about no one fucking up, because you're gonna fuck up, especially with, I've been in my relationship for 8 years coming up to now, that we've both made some big mistakes, not detrimental, not that you can't come back from. And again, everyone is, you get to decide what is something that's it, there's no way coming back from.
I like that. You get to decide. That's important.
You get to decide what that is within yourself, but also sometimes you might have a boundary and then it gets crossed in a relationship, and you think, well, this is the part where I'm supposed to leave. And I've had this.
That's what I'm saying.
I actually don't
right there. Right there. That right there is exactly what I'm talking about. It's where the ego kicks in and it speaks in other people's voices. You should, you've got no self-respect. You've got none of this. What I will say is it matters what you want. That matters. It does. It matters what you want. And if you want to move towards that, then that needs to be what the decision you make. We talk about, you need to make a decision and you stick to it. That needs to be it. Okay, I want to move towards it. Because asking yourself that question, I had clients before who are like, Johnny, I'm just not sure I can get over this. I'm not sure I can move past it. I said, you know what? You're not a fortune teller. You're never going to know the answer to that. It's the wrong question. The question is, do you want to? Because if you want to, you can make moves towards that. If you're both willing to work together and to look at it from a place of compassion, that's what I'm trying to say, I think. And
also that, there's a spectrum, because one person cheating or nearly cheating or whatever it is, because generally speaking, they're a good person, they're doing the work, but something that there are different factors, is not the same as someone where I was back in the day of just a fucking mess, cheating all over the place. I wasn't a bad person, I was very, very lost, but I was not in a place to be able to have a healthy relationship, anywhere near it at that time. It's different from your fuck boy on Love Island who's just sleeping, doesn't really give a fuck, sleeping and goes, oh, I'm really sorry, babe, and everything is nuanced. Everything is nuanced. So that's why doing the work on yourself and your relationship with yourself is the most important thing, because it's going to be able to tell you, your gut will tell you, this is a situation. Like with my parents, they did some really pretty shit stuff to each other. They got through. This is not many couples get through what they got through. That's why they're such an inspiration to me, because they prioritized their relationship with themselves first, and they wanted to make it work. They wanted to get through it. Most people, the vast majority of people, don't have the tenacity, the resilience, and the commitment that they did. But what's what you said? Do you want it? And and the thing is, you might really want to make it work with this fuck boy, or fuck girl, whatever. But your gut's saying they are not in a space right now.
They're not going to do the work.
When you make the relationship with yourself, it's not going to work, or at least it can't right now. And that's where it's hard, because often that is the case. One of you wants it and the other one, they might say they do, but they're not willing to do the work.
Yeah. That's more than answered the question. I hope that's helpful to people, because I try to ask the questions that matter on this podcast, the ones that really offer help. And I think when someone's in a situation like that and they don't know what to do, that is amazing advice. That really is, I think. Have you got time for one more question?
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So the last question, this was an interesting one that it got pitched to me on over my social group, and it was, it's so important that men be willing to learn and be taught how to treat women with respect and understand their needs. Do you feel there's an equal emphasis on women learning the same about men?
Yes.
You think so?
Yeah. Because I think what's happened with what wave are we on? Third wave feminists? Like, you know, we've been through so many differences, and it can sometimes become very binary of women versus men, women going, and I get it all the time. All men lie, all men cheat. And I'm like, I can literally give you so many examples of where women, myself mainly, have have actually been the one showing up as a man. You know, that was almost my badge of honor back in the day. Women, this is so interesting for me. So with men, they can hurt women by being violent, by cheating, all of these things. With women, like what I've heard is like the most painful thing a woman can do to a man is laugh at him, reject him, abandon him in some way. It's like really can cut deep. And I guess that, you know, Freudian mother, son, like there's all stuff we can go into there. I won't go into that now, but women have got to look at their side of it. What I can tell you is I got myself, as you've heard some examples, all sorts of scrapes. I got myself in a lot of, you know, I'd be at a party and I was hammered and I'd pass out and things would be done to me. That is not okay. That is not acceptable.
No.
And the other side of the conversation, if you're just focusing on the men doing the bad stuff, whether it's something really sinister like that, or a man just being, you know, shit at communicating or whatever it is. But if you're not looking at the other side of it, go, I cannot control what the men do. I can control how I show up. I can keep my side of the street clean. Guess what? I've not had any of those situations. Very rarely is it a man jumping out of a bush. And I'm not, listen, this is not about victim shaming, but it's saying that again, there are nuances. We have to look at the whole picture, and we have to realize this is not men versus women. This is us all in it together. And, you know, all the things with me, this is so uncomfortable. And I know many women where we make the controlling, the nagging, and I, you know, my husband can come in here right now and tell you, yeah, she still does that. I can laugh about it and go, God, sorry, you know, at least I've got the awareness with it. But it is like, it's second nature to me. It really is. I'm very good at it. And even worse, the put downs, you know, that's not okay. You know, we have got a side in this as well. And we all have to, it's self-responsibility. We all have got a part in it. And I know many women who, myself again included, who have treated the good guy who showed up and did everything right like utter shit. So it is not as simple as, you know, as just, well, we live in a patriarchal culture, men are the villains and women are great. And it's not as simple as that.
No.
So yeah, self-responsibility.
No, I love that. I mean, I was saying to a client the other day, they were telling me something and I helped them understand it a different way. And I said it's really important for men to get praise. They're little, can be a little bit like dogs sometimes. It's like, give me a treat then. I did something good. Come on, come on. And it can be with men, it can be that simple, honestly. And when when some women tell me what they said, I'm like, what happened next? And then they tell me, I'm like, okay, I knew that's what you were going to say. And I'm trying to help them understand, like, you know, it just wow, that's amazing, well done, just like, oh, thanks, you know, that's the means the world to most blokes. It really does, just seeing
You know
them.
what? Yeah, seeing them.
Yeah, and feeling appreciated. Like, you know, men want to be good provide. Look, you can talk about gender roles all day long, but I'm talking about the people that subscribe to, the men that subscribe to the idea of being providers, the men that subscribe to the ideas of being protectors and looking after. You know, those guys sometimes they need a bit of validation, as you said at the beginning. They need to be told, you know what, you know, we really appreciate you. Not maybe quite that way, but just in some token, in some way, you know, being shown that, you know, you really, you know, I never forget it sent me into a stereo almost when we were talking as a family, and we said to my kids, and we were asking about what some features were of parents and each other, and we were sort of sharing what we thought was really amazing about each other. And my son looked at me and said, Dad, you make me feel safe. You make me feel protected. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay, moving on. And then my other son was like, yeah, me too, Dad. And it's like, my wife was like, yeah, me too. I was like, cool. I don't know how to deal with this level of emotion. I'm about to go. Bye. Because
Wow.
to me, that is important because I've always been the protector. I protected my brothers and sisters as the kids. I protected my mum when I got a bit older. I've always been that. It's important to me, and I think it's individual you know, learning what the man in your life or the woman in your life, how they feel valued and showing them
Yeah.
how they feel valued, just giving that to them every now and again for no reason, not for anything, just to make them feel good. It can go a long way. So I resonate with that.
Yeah. Well, it's the love languages again, isn't it, as
Oh
well?
yeah, I should have asked you
Yeah.
about love languages, damn
Yeah,
it.
we'll have to quickly, because I'm like,
Mm.
what are they?
No,
So the 5 love languages. This is the way that we express and receive love. We tend to have 2 dominant ones. This is from the book by, I believe it's Gary Chapman. So it's words of affirmation. So that would be, you've done a great job, whatever. Gifts, acts of service. So that might be, they pick you up, they buy you dinner or whatever. There's loads of things.
mm,
Quality time and physical touch.
mm.
Um, and my husband and I, our 2 dominant ones happen to be the same. So I've always felt loved by him, and I think him the same. My ex-boyfriend, we had different ones, which actually made it's not impossible to have a relationship like that, but it can be harder because you have to work more at expressing love in a way that they experience it.
Does that feel like a sacrifice to the other person?
I think it can, like, so for
Yeah.
example, my ex-boyfriend was very much acts of service, but he wasn't that into the physical touch, not even really quality time. And so I often felt like not seen, or not, I didn't feel like, do you actually really love me? But he would do so many like kind, generous things for me, but it's not that I didn't acknowledge them, but I didn't see them as of the same importance that physical touch and quality time.
Oh, you can so see that miscommunication, how that can happen.
Oh,
Like,
and that's one of the
yeah,
main things that people
yeah.
struggle with. If you're in a relationship and you're like, oh, I would struggle, like literally, like Google 5 love languages and look at what are my 2 dominant ones. What do I think my husband or my partners are? And then you will go, oh, and then just your job is to express love to them in the ways that they're dominant ones, because they're going to receive it more. And then you can maybe gently have a conversation and go, isn't this interesting? These are my love languages. So, I really love it when people do this and this. You have to, it's like you were saying, and this is a generalization. I don't mean to be offensive in any way.
That's not as subtle as you think it is.
No, but you were saying about men being,
yeah.
like men like puppies, and this is like, I have a dog, I like love them, but like, women, we are very complex and complicated, but men, that when we go, oh, if you're, I'm pissed off at him, and you think, well, does he know? Well, no, he should know, and if he doesn't, I'm not going to tell him.
Yeah,
that's just, that does not work. Just, you've got
no.
to be very clear with men, and actually, try not to be patronizing, but when you're actually just really clear and don't play games and don't expect them to read your mind. You shouldn't expect any human to read your mind, but it really works. And you made me think about, my husband has been out mowing the lawn and getting our house all sorted, because we've let the gardens like mad and big and unruly. And it'd be really easy, because I've been here working and having a lovely conversation, to go out and to kind of go, oh yeah, great, but not to really take that in. And actually, I hope he can hear me now, I'm sure he's done a wonderful job. but yeah, he's put this, and I know that will mean a lot to him.
Yeah. And how small it is, isn't it? That guesswork, It's like, just like, miscommunication. Like, you really embarrassed me when you said that thing at that event, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to, I'm so sorry. That's what you'll get back most likely, because you're not with somebody that hates you. You're with somebody that loves you, and it's like giving them that opportunity to explain their side. If they don't know that they've done that, if they said something faultless and whatever, then they haven't had the opportunity to explain it. I think that's important too. So last thing before we go is there anything you'd like to pass on to people that could help them with their self-development?
I'm going to have to, a shameless plug again. I told you the message of the inner fix. I have to tell you the message of love is coming, because this changed everything in not just my love life, actually my life, when I started thinking this way. So we obviously live in a very consumerist Amazon Prime culture where we want what we want it yesterday, and it's we, you know, get me, you know, it's that and it's becoming increasingly like that with I think in many ways with social media, which has so many great things about it, but also other things which aren't so great. And you know, I used to just be obsessed with, I need a boyfriend, I want my boyfriend, I want my husband, or whatever it is. And so what the message of this book is, we need to stop looking outside of ourselves for the partner we want to get, and we need to start looking inside of ourselves for the partner we want to be.
Ooh.
So if you put the focus on becoming the partner that you desire on a metaphysical level, then you become an energetic, you know, vibrational match for that partner to come into your life. But more importantly, you know, when I was going on about wanting this and one, but hold on, what sort of partner would you be right now to that man? And I was like, oh yeah, not great, I'm sort of all over the place. You know, if you want a partner that is attractive, successful, emotionally available, or whatever it is that is really important to you, ask each of those things. Why do I want that? Like, why is that important to me? And sometimes it's like, oh, I've just been told that that's what I should want, you know, or it might be because I don't feel good enough in that area, so I need that person to. So it's like, well, no, you need to become those things, because firstly you become so much more magnetic as well, you know. You're not coming from a place of needing it, you are that thing. And it's like then it becomes like, I feel great, I love my life, come join me, let's share what we've got. It's a completely different thing from I need it.
Yeah. It's a different,
what I can
totally different. It's almost the opposite energy, isn't it? That's incredible. That's a brilliant advice. You're amazing. You are. I've enjoyed this conversation. What's next for you, and where can people find you?
So people can find me at persialawson.com, and I'm very active on Instagram at Persia Lawson, and I've got the easiest ways to engage with what I've got a podcast called Love Is Coming, loads of free episodes. You can just look on wherever podcasts are, and that's the same name as my book, Love Is Coming. So I wrote this book to be like, I'd written a sort of more traditional self-help book, and I wanted this book to be more like entertain. I wanted it to be like a beach read. So there's a lot of really funny stories, like storyteller really by trade. So that it's stories with lessons in it. That's what I wanted it to feel like. And like very like lots of different types of writing and styles. And you know, so if you want to like grow in your love life, and you want to have a giggle and also cry because there's some weepy bits, I really take you on a journey, then that's a good one. We also, one of the most useful things, again, completely free, we've got this scorecard. So my signature program is called Love for Leaders, and I work with women who identify as high achievers, or female leaders. And basically we've got this scorecard called the Love for Leaders scorecard, and you can get it if you go to my Instagram. It'll be in my bio, the link in my bio. And there's my book and my work, there's essentially, it's like how to get a healthy, exciting, meaningful relationship. There are 3 stages: heal, attract, commit. And what this scorecard does, there's 40 yes or no questions. I didn't put a maybe because everyone would do maybe. It's like you have to commit. Which way is it more? If it's 51% no, then go with no, you know.
Love it.
And so you answer these questions, and they're kind of in these 3 categories, but you don't know which category is what. And then you get an overall score. This is about how ready are you for a healthy, exciting, meaningful relationship that's a force for good, not drama. And then you get a score for each of those areas, and it is so fascinating to see what comes up.
Yeah, I bet.
And it gives you some really concrete sort of okay, that's what I need to work on. And then we've got free resources, and you know, we give you results, and we give you tips and things that you can do to kind of bring your score up. And that's also for the, you know, the high achiever in me. It's like, I need to get a score, and I need to improve my score.
I need metrics. I need metrics.
Data.
Listen, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed talking to you, learned a lot, and just think you're fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.